A mother's unwavering hope, a journey of reconnection. Have you ever felt the pain of being distanced from someone you love, even though you gave them everything you had? Maybe it's a child, a friend, or a family member, someone who once filled your life with joy, but now there's silence. The kind of silence that cuts deep, leaving you wondering what went wrong, and if there's any way back. Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, but learning to start over. Nicole Sobon. For Evelyn Thompson, this was a truth she knew all too well. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and love had been met with emotional distance from her only son, John. The letters had stopped coming. The visits had ceased. Her home, once filled with laughter and memories of his childhood, was now a place of longing. Then, out of the blue, came an invitation to John's wedding, the first sign of life from him in years. Was this a second chance? Could love heal the wounds of time and separation? Or would this invitation only bring more pain? This story is not just Evelyn's, it could be yours. A story of hope, heartbreak, and the courage to rebuild what's broken. The pain of distance in family relationships. Have you ever felt like you're losing touch with someone you care about deeply? Maybe it's a parent, sibling, or even a child. The problem is, over time, emotional distance can creep in without us even realizing it. You might be physically close, but emotionally, you're miles apart. And that emotional gap can hurt, sometimes more than we expect. When we don't put effort into maintaining our relationships, especially in families, we start feeling more like strangers than loved ones. This can lead to misunderstandings, feelings of abandonment, and a sense of loneliness. The more we let that distance grow, the harder it becomes to bridge the gap. Eventually, we may find ourselves regretting the time we didn't spend or the words we didn't say. There's a powerful quote that reflects this painful truth. The most painful thing is losing someone you thought you'd never lose. This resonates with many of us because family is supposed to be the one constant, the people we hold closest. Yet sometimes, without meaning to, we let those relationships slip away. It's a hard reality to face, but it happens when we neglect to nurture the bonds that matter most. The good news is that this doesn't have to be the case. Reaching out to those we care about is the first step toward healing. It doesn't always take a big gesture. Sometimes it's as simple as sending a text or making a quick phone call. The key is to start the conversation, even if it feels awkward at first. Opening up and being honest about how you feel can help bridge the emotional distance that has formed. If there's been tension or hurt, sometimes just talking about it can make a huge difference. Families are not perfect, and it's okay to acknowledge the problems. What matters is the willingness to address them before they grow too large to fix. Another important step is to make time for the people who matter most. Life gets busy, and we often put family on the back burner. But setting aside time, even if it's just a few minutes, to connect can mean the world to someone. Whether it's a casual chat or sharing a meal together, small gestures of time and attention help keep the relationship strong. Finally, learning to forgive and let go of the past can be one of the most powerful ways to close the distance between you and a loved one. Holding on to old grudges or resentment only keeps you apart. If you can find it in your heart to forgive, you're not just healing the relationship, you're healing yourself as well. Family relationships, like all relationships, require effort, patience, and understanding, but the rewards are well worth it. The power of forgiveness in healing relationships. Think about a time when you felt hurt by a family member. Maybe it was something they said or something they didn't say. We all experience conflict or misunderstanding in relationships, and it's painful. But what happens if we hold on to that pain? If we let the hurt grow and fester, it can damage the relationship permanently. The truth is, unresolved anger and resentment can poison family dynamics. When we don't practice forgiveness, we end up carrying the weight of past conflicts. It's like dragging a heavy backpack filled with grudges, and it affects not only our relationship with others, but our own peace of mind. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened or saying that it's okay to hurt you. It's about letting go of the anger so that you can heal and move forward. There's a quote that beautifully captures this. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. This reminds us that unforgiveness is more harmful to us than to the person who hurt us. Holding on to negative emotions keeps us stuck in the past, making it difficult to enjoy the present and build a better future. Forgiveness frees us from that emotional weight. So, how can we start to forgive and heal? First, we need to acknowledge our feelings. It's easy to suppress anger or sadness because we don't want to deal with it. But ignoring our emotions only makes the pain worse. It's okay to admit that you're hurt. Expressing your feelings, whether to the person involved or in a safe space like a journal, can be incredibly healing. Next, try to see things from the other person's perspective. This doesn't mean you have to agree with their actions or justify their behavior, but understanding why they acted the way they did can help you let go of the anger. Sometimes, people hurt us because they're dealing with their own pain, or they might not even realize the impact of their actions. Empathy can be a powerful tool in the process of forgiveness. Forgiveness also means giving up the need for revenge or an apology. Often, we hold on to grudges because we want the other person to feel the same pain we did, or we're waiting for them to apologize. But waiting for an apology can prolong your suffering. Instead, choose to forgive for your own peace, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve peace. Remember, forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. It might take time to truly let go of the hurt, and that's okay. Start small. Even with a simple mental shift, decide to let go of the anger for your own well-being. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was, but it can open the door for healing and moving forward in the relationship. One more thing to keep in mind is that forgiveness doesn't mean you should allow harmful behavior to continue. Setting boundaries is an important part of the process. You can forgive someone, but still choose to protect yourself from further harm. Forgiveness is about releasing the emotional burden, not about tolerating mistreatment. By embracing forgiveness, you're giving yourself the opportunity to heal and grow. It's not just about the other person, it's about taking back control over your own happiness and well-being. In the end, healing a family relationship requires both understanding and a willingness to let go of the past. The importance of active listening in building strong relationships. Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt like the other person wasn't really listening to you? Maybe they were distracted, or they interrupted you before you could finish. It can be frustrating, especially when you're trying to communicate something important. In many family relationships, miscommunication is one of the leading causes of tension and misunderstanding. When we don't listen actively, it's easy for feelings to get hurt, for assumptions to be made, and for conflicts to arise. The problem is, without truly listening to each other, we miss out on understanding what the other person is going through. We might think we know what they're feeling or what they need, but we're only guessing. This can lead to arguments, feelings of being misunderstood, and a sense of distance. Active listening is about being fully present in the moment and really hearing what the other person is trying to express. There's a quote by Stephen Covey that sums it up perfectly. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. It's easy to fall into the trap of waiting for our turn to speak rather than truly focusing on what the other person is saying. This kind of listening isn't productive, and it can make the other person feel unheard or undervalued. So, what can we do to be better listeners in our family relationships? The first step is to give the other person your full attention. That means putting away distractions like phones or the TV and focusing solely on them. When you're actively listening, you're showing respect for their thoughts and feelings. It may take some practice, but the more you do it, the more natural it will feel. Another important aspect of active listening is asking questions. After the other person shares something, instead of jumping in with your own opinion or solution, try asking questions that show you want to understand better. For example, you might say, "Can you explain more about how that made you feel?" Or, "What do you think we should do about this?" This not only helps you understand them more deeply, but it also makes them feel valued and heard. Sometimes, we assume that we know what the other person means, but those assumptions can get us into trouble. Instead of assuming, try to paraphrase what they've said to make sure you understand. For example, "So you're saying that you felt upset when I didn't help with the chores, is that right?" This gives them a chance to clarify or expand on their feelings, and it shows that you're trying to understand them correctly. Active listening isn't just about hearing the words being said, it's also about paying attention to the emotions behind those words. Nonverbal cues, like body language and tone of voice, can tell us a lot about what someone is feeling. If someone says, "I'm fine," but their body language is tense, it's important to notice that and dig a little deeper to understand what's really going on. By practicing active listening, you create a space for open and honest communication. When people feel listened to, they are more likely to open up, which can strengthen the bond between you. It also helps avoid misunderstandings and build empathy in the relationship. Remember that listening is a skill that takes time to develop. It's easy to fall back into habits of interrupting or thinking about what you're going to say next, but by staying present and fully engaged in the conversation, you'll see the positive impact it has on your relationships. In the end, active listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about understanding each other, building trust, and showing that you care. The more you practice it, the better your family relationships will become. The power of forgiveness in family relationships. Have you ever held a grudge against a family member? Maybe they said something hurtful or they disappointed you and you just couldn't let it go. It's easy for these feelings to build up and create a wall between you and the people you care about. The problem is, holding on to anger or resentment can cause long-term damage to family relationships. It can make communication difficult, create distance, and even lead to broken bonds that may never heal. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened or that you let someone off the hook for their behavior. It means releasing the hurt and giving yourself the freedom to heal. Without forgiveness, the pain festers, and over time, it becomes harder to rebuild trust or move forward. The longer you hold onto grudges, the more your relationship suffers, and that distance becomes harder to bridge. As the famous quote by Buddha reminds us, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When we stay angry, we're only hurting ourselves. It can take a lot of strength to forgive, but by doing so, we take control of our own peace and happiness. It's not about excusing the other person's actions, but about freeing ourselves from the weight of carrying that anger. One of the first things to consider when working on forgiveness is understanding why the other person acted the way they did. Often, when someone hurts us, their actions come from their own struggles or pain. While it doesn't justify the hurt they caused, recognizing that they might be going through something can help us approach the situation with more empathy and compassion. This doesn't mean you have to accept bad behavior, but it can shift your perspective and make it easier to let go of the anger. Another key part of forgiveness is realizing that it's for you, not the other person. Holding on to resentment or anger can affect your mental health and well-being. It can lead to stress, anxiety, and even physical problems. Forgiving allows you to let go of that burden and move forward with a clearer heart and mind. It's a way to reclaim your peace and not let anyone else's actions control your emotional state. To start the process of forgiveness, begin by expressing how you feel. Often, we hold on to our pain without talking about it. When you feel ready, have an open and honest conversation with the person who hurt you. Let them know how their actions affected you, but also be prepared to listen to their side of the story. Sometimes, simply talking things through can clear the air and make it easier to let go of the anger. It's also important to remember that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciling. In some cases, it's okay to forgive someone, but choose to keep some distance for your own well-being. Forgiveness allows you to release the negative emotions without having to continue a close relationship if it's not healthy for you. Forgiveness is a journey, not something that happens overnight. It may take time, especially if the hurt runs deep. But the act of forgiving is a powerful step toward healing. It frees you from the burden of carrying past pain, and it opens the door for growth and stronger connections in your family. Ultimately, forgiveness is an act of self-care. By choosing to forgive, you're giving yourself the gift of peace and the chance to move forward with a lighter heart.